Don't drink Pepsi. I got off this stuff for years, but I'm having one on account of today.
Fair.
Living crazy. All right, everyone. Thank you for tuning into the Voice of Reasons broadcast, where we discuss everything philosophy, theology, and conspiracy. The idea is exploring anything related to the nature of reality. And we don't want the official narrative. We as me, and it's my show. And I don't want to talk to the guys that, make the rules. I want to talk to the guys that break the rules. So I've got dynamic people coming on this show who have something to contribute to this discussion. And it's going to be an organic discussion. It's going to be people that aren't tainted by prestige or accreditation. So I'm looking for specific individuals that have something that they've figured out how to do, usually through their own prowess, that somebody can learn from, or maybe we'll change how we see the world. So that's the goal. And my guest today, his name is Jack. He's known as Jackary on TikTok. And basically, if you're not on TikTok, you gotta be. Like, I'm an old guy, and my wife's like, you gotta be on TikTok. And I'm like, I don't even do Facebook. But TikTok's the wild, wild west of information. And what's great about it is if you have something to contribute and you do it in a halfway decent manner, people will notice and people will get involved. And this gentleman you see here is 155,000 followers. That means football stadiums filled with people saw him doing whatever he's doing, and they're like, yeah, I want to see what that dude's fucking doing. And they're
put
following
it like
him.
that. Oh God.
Yeah, dude.
No pressure.
No, yeah. It's probably like 2 entirely packed football stadiums or like 5 basketball stadiums of just people watching you on the camera up there doing your awesome things. But it's great because I said to him in the email, I said, how does Elijah Wood playing Sheldon Cooper end up doing this? And I mean, the guy's funny, he's smart, and he's dynamic. So welcome to the show, Jackary. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. This is going to be a blast.
We had our little pre-discussion, and I think the only thing that's going to ruin this is time, unfortunately. But the first thing... spoiler. So the first thing, just to kind of get started, is how do you, a guy with your kind of intellect, educational prowess, when I think of like a social media guy, I think of the loser in high school who's like trying to show that he's cool now and like nobody believes it, whatever. How do you go, you know what, I'm going to go on TikTok and be this personality? Like how does that happen? Because I wouldn't have expected it from you, but you do it really well. So how did you find TikTok, and tell me about what you're doing on it?
Well, first of all, I kind of was the not very cool person in high school and in college, because I actually was homeschooled all the way up through high school.
High five for homeschoolers.
Like Catholic parents, public school is where the devil and abortions are, so you must be homeschooled. But it I think definitely played a big role in me studying so many different things, because I had the opportunity to just kind of do whatever I wanted. But obviously there is very much that cliche outcast side of it where you really do not have very many friends comparatively. Hobbies are harder to come by. Didn't play sports, so no, I was a complete loser, absolutely.
Okay,
but
I want to hear more about this, because it turns out that the kids who were the outcasts are usually the ones who blossom later in their lives. They usually have a better skill set because they're not busy running around chasing girls, drinking beer, whatever. So it's not a surprise that who isn't necessarily successful in high school becomes successful in real life. We've seen that over and over. But the homeschool thing, so you said, I'm the outcast, and, the school and abortion, all that stuff's the devil. And then you said, but who I am today is probably a product of this. Because I have a 6-year-old boy, and he's homeschooled. And I face all that social kind of, everybody going, you've got to be in school, you got to normalize them. And I'm like, anything I've seen the last couple of years, like, I don't know if I particularly want normal. I mean, not that that's who I am anyways. But like, I love that you said that, you didn't have that normal experience. But now look, like if I could if I could fast forward and see my son, not to be too flattering, but in 20 years, and he's done what you've done, I'd feel like I accomplished as a parent, right? So better than some kid who got hooked on drugs or whatever, and promiscuity, got some girl pregnant, and then he's working at the Home Depot or whatever. Like that, it's not a bad outcome where you ended.
Yeah, and I'd say that being homeschooled is one of those things where how well it goes is completely dependent on the
don't say the
like the situation at home, like how much are the parents involved in contributing and like guiding, and how much does the child give a shit. So like there are people that I've known who were also homeschooled, but because they either didn't have the drive, or their parents didn't have the time, or like the finances even to give them the education that they needed, they weren't able to quote unquote succeed.
Yeah.
Which I know is
That's
super
scary.
subjective, but like they didn't have the same opportunities that I did. Like I was able to afford to go to local community colleges when I was in high school to get dual credit, so I could beef up my resume for like
Awesome.
undergrad. So like, yeah, I was homeschooled, but my parents said, hey, you need more good stuff on your transcript. Why don't you go to San Antonio College down the street? Go to St. Philip's and take some physics classes, and if you do that when you're 17, it'll look even better. So I was doing stuff like that, but not everyone has that opportunity. So if you do have opportunities like that to kind of like build your own education and work with your parents to build a strong program, you could end up doing really, really well. But if you don't have that, some people just get screwed.
So not to like sum up this entire interview, because I think we're going to have a lot of these concessions where we find middle ground, but what you're saying is to go to public school or to not go to homeschool, there's no truth. The truth is in the approach and what you end up doing with it, right? Like you could be a terrible parent,
Yeah.
send your kid to school and beat your kid, and they're going to fail in public school. And you could do the same thing with homeschooling, and they're going to fail too. I mean, parenting is a big part of it. But if you as a parent, you have buy-in, like you did say finances, but if you have ownership in the process, and your intention is to actually educate your child and not just whatever your ulterior motive would be, it can succeed. So it's really it's everybody looks for these finite truths, these indisputable fact outcomes, and it's never that. It's always situational, and it's how the person kind of approaches it. So it sounds like you had a really good parental support structure that made it work. So it's not that homeschooling does or doesn't work, it's that you have to have the right situation. That's really profound.
Yep. There is no 100% right. Like that's why there's different systems. There are people that homeschooling works for, and there's people that absolutely should not do it. But you have to have that maturity as a parent to know, which one you should go with.
So we've only been talking for 20 minutes or whatever, but if you could imagine my ADD brain in class, it was the death of me. I couldn't sit in place. I was always hopped up on sugar. I can't believe I'm telling the story. I would take what you would normally make Kool-Aid with, like the cup of sugar and the Kool-Aid packet, and I would pour it together into a Ziploc bag, and I would take it to school, and I would eat it throughout the whole day.
Oh my God.
It's terrible. It's the worst diet ever. This stuff. Anyway, so I was me, ADD brain, like home trauma, all that stuff. And then I would go to school and try and sit in place all hopped up on this sugar, cocaine, Kool-Aid mix I had. Terrible. So that public school wasn't good for me, and I think homeschool would have been good. But we'll find out.
Probably.
So you mentioned your dad, or you mentioned your parents. I saw one of the last videos was your dad kind of ghosting you on the 150. Tell me about that.
Oh yeah, so he's not very in tune with like what the kids are doing these days. He's like pushing 60, so TikTok is not something that's really on his radar at all. But I think he probably has the same assumption my bosses did at work when I brought this up, which was, oh, that's that place where people do the dances. And that's all it is. Yep. Because that's what TikTok got famous for, was just a bunch of horny high schoolers, throwing it back. And
isn't that what makes everything popular, though? I feel like anything that's been worth anything has been horny high school. It doesn't matter if it's hair metal bands or TikTok.
I guess. So I think he just thought it was that. So when I told him, like, hey, I have 150,000 followers on TikTok, his response was, it was a couple seconds of silence, and then, why?
Yeah.
Because he was like, well, what are you doing on there? And I told him, I was like, I just make jokes and people like it, and I talk about ADHD, and he just kind of was like, well, all right then, man, you do you. And I think he's also kind of maybe worried, like, I'm putting myself out there, and if you have a big following and people are looking at you, then you could be in trouble for something. I don't know. But.
He goes, as long as you ain't shaking your ass out there, son. That's what he thought. So I watched your video because I wanted to catch up on some of your content. I hadn't looked in the last couple of days. And in addition to being entertaining and actually really liking everything you make, obviously wanted to catch up with what's new with you. But
yeah.
I saw that, and dads are pretty profound. Like, I'm a dad, so I can say that. So, like, they'll have a perspective that the kid's never going to have. The kids do stupid shit. We run on the top of stairs, and we run into the street, and dads are always like, they've been there, they've done that, they've seen it, which is why I'm a big advocate for parents actually parenting their children. And when he said why, it made it to me, it hit me on like a bigger level. I think I even commented on your page. Like, it's a good question. Like, for me, my end game is to do this professionally where, we don't need to make a ton of money. We paid cash for our house, but I don't want to go get a job again. I want to do this. So that's I'm on TikTok to get people interested in what I'm doing, and then to push them to the podcast and push them to the website and stuff. And I was thinking about it with you, like, when there's actually a question I want to get to is the why is a good question. And it's actually kind of the first question I had with you is like 150,000 TikTok followers doesn't equal $1,500 a month in your pocket, right? You're not getting that money. So what, and this isn't me being critical. It's me being, I think there's a bigger thing here that we'll get to later, but what, like your dad would say, why? Like, why do this? And what is your end game with TikTok?
Ooh, okay. So my account kicked off by accident. I mean, I know, like, this is probably going to take us a lot back to the beginning of the original question, which was like, were you a loser in high school? Why'd you get into TikTok? So I, was like everybody else at the beginning of COVID, bored as hell, not at work, and needed something stupid to do. And so I got the app and was just scrolling through it. And so from like February, March-ish of 2020, all the way through to September, I was on the app, and I was, I would post a video like every 2 or 3 weeks. Well, I would just be chilling out one day and a stupid joke would pop into my head, and I'd be like, I'm going to put this on the internet. Like, just why not? And it was never like, I'm expecting that I'm going to be viral, and I want to be viral. It was more just like, hey, this is kind of a dumb joke. Let's throw this out there. I think one of the first things I ever posted was I for example, I walked into my kitchen one day and there was a dead bee, like a dead bumblebee, on the windowsill above my sink. And I looked at it, and this idea for a video just hit me. And I was like, I'll make this. And so the video is me walking to the kitchen, and I find the bee. And I go, oh, no, are you good, buddy? And I kind of poked it, and it didn't move. And I went, God damn it, here we go. So I go into the freezer, and I got a bottle of vodka, and I poured a shot. And then I slid it over to him, and I said, hey, man, I don't know who killed your buzz, but this should help. And I slid it over to him, and like that was one of the first things I made, and it got seen by like 100 people, but it didn't matter because it was just a dumb joke that I wanted to throw out there. But
so how cool is this platform for that? Like, I went from being critical of my wife spending so much time on it to really embracing it and hoping that it doesn't get censored or pulled down or whatever, because that's your thing. You have these cool, that was a dad joke video. I think I remember you called it a dad joke, and it's good. It's a good bee pun. And without TikTok, you couldn't have justified doing that on, say, YouTube. My chicken just walked by out front. That's funny. They're starting to get kind of frisky. So you wouldn't do that on YouTube. You wouldn't do it on Facebook. So there's this like anonymity, this amnesty you have on TikTok. But what's great about it, and it makes me really excited for the human condition, is like people are really fair on there. Like, there are some trolls, but like for the most part, like, do the thing and throw it out there and see how it does. And like, that is freeing us up as creators and as people, like, whether it's comedians or philosophers or whatever, to just be you. And I think obviously we need that. And I think it's really cool. And I think it's really cool that you went from that to getting some confidence in it. And now, you're making really good content, and you wouldn't have probably done that without TikTok. And so, I definitely encourage people. I'm not a Gary V guy, but I heard him, a couple years ago, whatever, talking about you got to get on TikTok, you got to make content. And I'm like, why do you, like, I want to make content because I have something I want to say, but why does your standard person need to make content? They don't particularly.
Yes.
And now I'm like, they do, because they all have their own story, and they all have their own quirks, their own dynamicism, and not everybody's going to get 150,000 followers, but go ahead.
Yeah, so I have like another podcast in a couple of weeks that I got invited to be on, and they told me what they wanted me to talk about, and I'm going to say the same thing I'm going to say to them. When it comes to going viral or, making it big or having a lot of followers, it's not something that works if it's something that you're actively, desperately chasing. Yeah. So when you see these people on YouTube, these these really big accounts, usually like the family vloggers or the couple vloggers who have like 5 to 10 million subscribers, and they try to sell programs to kids who have access to mom's credit card, and they're like, hey, if you give me $100, I'll teach you how to go viral every time. The people who buy that stuff that aren't like just children but are like adults that are actually genuinely trying, that's never going to work, because taking a course in how to make a viral video is inherently going to be result in you creating a product that is not yours. It's something it's influenced by everything you've learned from this viral creator. So you can't just force it. And this is going to sound like gatekeeping, like, hey, if you're not as funny and cute as me, then you're not going to be. But that's not what I'm trying to say. It's more like, if you've got something to say and you have a joke that you just want to throw out there, then do it. If it kicks off, amazing. And if it doesn't, it's fine.
Dude,
because you don't get lucky with the algorithm every time. I made probably 10, 15 videos before my first huge one last September that started all this.
I don't think it's even luck. And I have to not interrupt you, so I apologize, but you said so many things there that are so profound. First off, it's a self-help. It's self-help, right? It's the fat person. I don't even say fat. It's the overweight person who wants to see how Richard Simmons, whichever that guy was, how he runs and gets thin, and so they buy the DVD and they never can do the work. It's people. I 100% agree with you. Like, if you're the guy who has to buy how do I go viral, either you're not going to go viral, or you shouldn't be the kind of person that is going to go viral because it's not organic, right? And TikTok
is for the wrong reasons.
TikTok is surprisingly good at finding like organic people. Now, I'm not talking about the cat gets struck by the lightning video that gets 1 billion views. Everybody loves that. I'm talking about like people, like personalities, like you're organic, and throw it out there. And if it doesn't work, don't be critical of yourself. Just go, shit, I'm not great at that, and people don't want to look at my stupid face. Whatever, it's fine. If you are organic, keep putting that out there. And what I'm seeing about the algorithm so far, I've only made a couple videos where I'm like, that should have taken off and it didn't. For the most part, if you can look at it critically and go, if I came to that video, would I watch it? And if the answer is yes, it's probably worth it. And if the answer is no, then it's going to suck, and the people are going to be the judge, and it's fine.
Yeah, I mean, and you pick up tricks along the way. Like, if I post a video that in my head was like, okay, this is like a 50K views at least level video, and I post it, I wait a couple hours, and it's at like 1,000, then it's, okay, what did I do wrong? And I'll go back and rewatch it. And usually it's one of a couple things. It's something that's easy to swipe away from. So like, the first second being super critical, if it doesn't grab somebody immediately, they're going to keep going. So what was wrong with those first couple seconds? And then like, was the video or sound quality bad? Are usually the first two big things. And so once things like that start to click, you kind of figure out the tricks to make people stay those first few seconds. And then once they're hooked, they're hooked.
Well, and I totally agree. And what I would encourage anybody who's thinking about getting into TikTok, rather than, trying to catch the person, because I think you can also see through that, be organically who you are, and make sure the production value is good enough that you're not going to lose a person because of that. And I've been guilty of that as well. But I think that when you start getting into, I got to keep them for a second, I got to think 50K views, I think that it can lose a little bit of it being organic. Now, I'm a little bit of a truist, and I used to treat my band the same way. Like, I'm going to make music that I believe in, not to try and fit the model. And my band was never successful. So maybe you're right. Like, we have to follow like a certain formula. But for me, it's like, if it's something that you're passionate about, it's something that you can, you feel it in your heart when you're throwing it out there. I think it's got a chance, and it's not going to affect everybody the same. Like, I don't want to say I'm not going to have 150,000 followers, but my goal isn't 150,000 followers. I want 50,000 followers that are looking for the specific thing that I can do. And I try and keep that. Like, if I wanted to just do fart jokes, this, that, whatever, and just gain people, whatever, that'd be one thing. But like, the people that come to you know about your humor now and are expecting you to do it. And so now you can free yourself and go, I'm good. Make sure it doesn't suck. Get it out there and let it snowball, man. And it's doing that. Yeah.
I mean, like, the difference between having 5 million followers, half of which are bots and the other half are just, someone who hit it nonchalantly, like, oh, that was funny, I guess, and whatever. Difference between that and like my 150, some of which probably are bots, but like the majority of them are people who they DM me for mental health advice and how to handle ADHD or like how to handle diagnosis stuff. People who, somebody somebody I used to work with who got a lot of hate for being a trans male in our line of work, DM'd me because he was so grateful to see somebody from a place, from where we used to do our job, that was like an ally, because I made that obvious in a video that I did. Or people who are just, asking for, help, or I comment on something that a fan made and they just lose their minds, like, oh my God, Jackery saw my video.
That's
and
awesome.
It's so fun to just kind of throw things out into the ether that either make someone's day genuinely better or just make somebody happy for a second.
That's
Because
amazing.
when I made the Harry Potter joke about dead serious, Order of the Phoenix, like that thing, it hit 1 million views today. I put it up like 2 days ago, and that's just kind of a dumb meme. But it brings people in, and then they start scrolling, and then I'll have a video where I'm just doing Q&As with people. Like, someone says, "Hey, what were your best tools for getting through school while being unmedicated?" And then you educate. So I've kind of got this combination now of putting out like information to help people, which is great, and also just putting out dumb memes to make people laugh a little bit.
Dude,
so it's great.
I mean, I said going into this that I have a lot of respect for what you're doing, but that obviously takes it to another level. And I think we as humans we're so actually similar. I mean, across political spectrum, gender, sexual preference, beliefs, we're so actually similar at our core 2, 3, 4 things. And I believe that we either want to neutrally affect the person or positively affect the person. And that we're all like this kind of working class group of people who want to have liberty and want to have the freedom to do the thing we want. And it's really encouraging to hear you say that, because what it is like a guy that's having some success who's finding a little bit of a calling in helping people. And that's like, that puts a level of validity to it that I think that, you may not have also done through TikTok. You probably didn't see yourself as a guy that was like, I'm going to go and see this guy who's got a problem and try and counsel them. But with the way information is today, you can actually say something, do something, reach out to that person and severely positively affect them. And that's awesome that you're trying to do that.
Yeah, I don't make any money from the app. It's not monetized. I don't have any advertisers yet. I'm in talks with one potentially, but like as of now, up until now, it's all just been either because I was motivated to jump back in and make something to like help a specific person or group, or just because I have a lot of stupid things to say and just like to just throw them out there. My wife's the other night, I mean, she was joking, but she said like, I'm really, really happy that you have so many followers now, because you and I both know that I don't laugh at enough of your jokes for you to feel validated. So your dad jokes are great, but we've known each other for 10 years and I've heard all of them. So I'm really happy that you have other people to, throw that shit at. So that helps. But dude, I don't make money. So like I'd much rather be motivated by it as a hobby. And as, a way to help people even in tiny ways. Because if I'm jumping on there like, oh, great, well, this is my income stream, I better do my 6 hours of TikToking today, then I'm not going to want to do it.
Legitimately the definition of selling out, right? And that's the danger. I was a professional snowboarder, and this was like 95, 96. And this company that I rode for, Never Summer was the name of the snowboard company. They paid for my season pass. I had another company that wanted me to ride for them, and I agreed to do it. And so they wrote me a check, and I went and bought my season pass. And I'll never forget strapping my snowboard in, and everybody looked at me different, and I felt different. And instead of me being a snowboarder that was pushing it and everybody was excited for, now they all expected something out of me. Yeah. And it was, I was 17. I had no idea contextually that would happen, but it really does change things when you go from passion and funding it yourself and people being excited about it to, now you're getting paid and you better be good. Yeah,
it does change it a lot.
Yeah, but I think, you keep doing what you're doing. And like you said about videos that work and videos that don't, if it's supposed to, I'm not like this guy that's like everything works out for a reason, but if it's supposed to take on something else, who knows, what happens with 1 million followers and maybe, what I think is going to happen, or I guess what I hope is going to happen is Hollywood and the music industry as we know it is going to go away. And everything is going to be this kind of organic,
like crowdsourced
dynamic
entertainment.
Yeah. Where, you know, you don't have to be the best looking or the best singer. You know, you can do things and not have to meet this certain level. So I think that's kind of where it's going. You might be too good looking for that, unfortunately, because I'm hoping for the ugly people to be able to have a run. That's my goal. Yeah, I think it's going in a good direction. I think that, you know, like you said, you're interested in it and you just keep making organic stuff and seeing where it goes. Because, I mean, this is, what, 6 months now of success you've started having, 3 months, something like that?
Like, I'm on, like, month 8 now. It's been,
8?
like, 8 months. Yeah.
Yeah. It's hard for me to tell a timeline, but who knows where it's going to be a year from now. And, yeah, I think it's valuable what you're doing, and I'm stoked, and especially knowing that you want to help people now. And that is huge, because having those discussions with your followers, the people that are excited about it, you can tell that it affects them, and to you to like take time out of here, because for a long time celebrity was unapproachable, right? You couldn't talk to the celebrity. Now it's like, dude, I'm a person, you're a person. You could affect them in a very positive way, and that's awesome.
Oh, for sure.
Okay, so that was 20 minutes talking about TikTok. This is going to be
question 1. That was 1.
Yeah, question 1. So the video that actually, what was the first video that you had that really went nuclear?
So the first video I had that went just crazy was when I had 75 followers, and I one day, like literally just one random afternoon, like on a Saturday, I was taking a nap, and this thing occurred to me while I was taking said nap, and it was just an ADD thought, and the thought was, holy shit, if your brain creates serotonin, but it also enjoys that same serotonin, that means that your brain is pleasuring itself. So anytime you're in a good mood, your brain is just jacking off.
That's great.
And so obviously that's not scientifically correct, because a lot of serotonin comes from the stomach. And the people let me know in the comments, trust me. But I made that into a bit where it was 2 guys, and one guy had glasses on and one didn't. And one dude's just having this like existential crisis. And the dude walks in and he's like, "What's wrong, man?" And he just looks at him and he starts like saying all that in order, and that was the whole thing. And it was just a dumb joke, and I turned my phone off and I went back an hour later, and in an hour it had been seen 40,000 times. I was just like, oh god. And 2 days later I had 10,000 followers. It was like, wow. Oh god. And because that didn't fall into a specific brand or vein, my account has never been like one thing. Like, you know, there's accounts are like, this is a dance account, this is a woodworking account, this is a gymnastics account. My thing is like, it's all over the place. That's why I used to have in my bio, "Welcome to Chaos," is because it's just, it could be a meme one day, it could be an educational piece one day, or an atheism joke. Like, it's everywhere.
Well, and that's why one of the reasons I was interested in having you on, and why I think you're having the success that you're having, is that's hard to pull off. It's hard to be, you know, if you're a guy that gives golf tips, don't try and show them how to play the guitar. If you're a guy, you know, whatever, crossing fields and stuff, to be like genre neutral and have success is it really speaks to the personality, and that's it alleviates you a little bit, because you just kind of do whatever you want. And that's, I want to wrap up the TikTok thing. I obviously ask another question, but I think that's why I would encourage people to do this. And one of the reasons I want to have this podcast is because if you're not on TikTok, if you're like Jackary's dad, or if you're like a good buddy of mine who's an information connoisseur and you won't get on TikTok, I'm obviously not working for TikTok, and there's things I don't like about it as well, but get on, do something that if you have something to add, do a stupid tip thing you figured out, see what happens. It's really cool to make something you're passionate about and have people give you positive feedback. And
you don't have to be the best.
It doesn't have to be the best, but being either really dynamic or, you know, good looking and really smart and all that stuff, that's always really helpful. That reminds me that when I was preparing for this, I was thinking about, you know, I was researching you and your content, and, you know, I'm assuming you're fairly tall, taller than me, 5'10", 11, 6 foot, something like that.
I'm 5'11".
Okay, so tall, good looking, young, successful, educated. And I realized that you and I are the exact opposite person. I'm short and goofy looking and uneducated and old. I guess it's just a, you know, self-destruction kind of thing to say. But yeah, it's just, and atheist and believer. So like, you've ever seen Unbreakable?
Okay, yeah. Yeah, of course, yeah.
Yeah, so you're Bruce Willis and I'm Samuel L. Jackson, or vice versa. Whoever wants to be whoever in that.
Okay, so you're Mr. Glass. Got it.
Yeah, am I Glass or are you? Who's Glass?
Glass being Samuel L. Jackson.
Yeah, I know, but is that you or me? Which I just want to know who I am.
Oh, you're Glass because your ideas are insane.
Okay, good. Oh, I love that.
I'm
God, that's a
Bruce
good movie.
Willis. I'm Bruce Willis because I'm just the boring white guy.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, never really tried. Like you play that game with like which Spice Girl are you? But I've never thought. I've never thought of which
M. Night
Unbreakable
Shyamalan characters.
Yeah, no, I've never thought of that. It's a great movie though, and I need to watch that because I haven't seen it in a bunch of years. That would probably be in there in the top. You know, it wouldn't be Matrix, Truman Show, They Live, Unbreakable, but I think it might be top 20. All right, so the video that was the video that you started off with that really went crazy. I haven't had the 40,000. I had a video I made. I don't know if you saw it or not, but it's a question the establishment and can you trust science? And I'm sure you'd love it. And it's at 100,000 views and it happened pretty quick.
Nice.
And yeah, I've seen the whole like it starts to get shared and duetted and stuff, and it's cool. It's a lot of fun to go through those. So the one that pulled me in was you're a dumb smart person. Show me that you're a smart person, whatever, without showing me. And the books, that's what really pulled me in. And it was like you were reading. Those would be the books that I had on my bookshelf if I was a big reader, which I'm not. And I want to know what those areas of study in particular, what they have in common and how because they seem kind of all over the place for me, but also I can see how they're all connected. So how does, let's talk about what those books were, what you were studying, and how you got into them individually and collectively.
Well, the one thing they all have in common is that one day my ADD brain just said, dopamine, that way, go over there. And it was that book, and then that book, and then that book. I want to say it kind of all comes back to used to be extremely religious, had a lot of problems with it, couldn't explain things, and then desperately wanted to understand more. Like, I started studying the theory of relativity. Do you know what the great courses are?
No, sorry.
Okay, so we used to get this catalog when I was a kid. I don't know if it's a thing anymore, but it's called the Great Courses. You pay like $150 and you get like a Harvard level lecture in just like one thing. And it's like 15, like 30-minute lectures from like a legitimate major university. And when I was
before YouTube.
Kinda, yeah. But this was in like 2010 or 11. We got one of those catalogs and I was looking through it. And there was one for like $80. It was a series of lectures on relativity. And I remember looking at it and I was just like, what the fuck is relativity? And I was like, Mom, can I have this? And she was super confused. Like, you want me to buy you a lecture series? I was like, yeah, this one on relativity. And she did. And so I watched it in my room on my old little DVD player because I didn't have a computer, but yeah. Awesome. And that was the first thing. And then about a year later, I was taking just like basic physics 1 at a local community college for dual credit, and it just snowballed. I needed to understand everything, and I was desperate to. And that was happening at the same time I was questioning my faith, which was telling me, these are all the answers. They're all right here in this one book. And then I now keep on my shelf. I have a Quran, I have a Bible, but then I also have 30 other things that are all about trying to understand how things work and why things work. And I'd say that, we mentioned this in the pre-discussion. Religion, religious beliefs, theism is just a very, very old version of trying to explain what we see. Quantum mechanics, cosmology, astrophysics, chemistry is the modern variation that is a lot less fallible and can be tested, that is trying to explain why and how. And I mean those in the biggest sense, like everything, why and how. And it took a long time for me to be comfortable with the fact that I'm never going to have complete answers. That we might never have, Einstein's answer to the theory of everything. But there might not be a unified field theory.
Yeah.
But if you get comfortable with that, it becomes a lot easier to just turn into this sponge who's desperate to soak up information.
Good. So much I would want to say on that. And I agree with you that religion and what we see as science is very similar, and trying to discuss our origins and how things work. Because in particular back then, maybe they had some very rudimentary telescopes or whatever, but definitely no large hadron colliders and these microscopes where they could, they didn't have that access, so they could only postulate. And with the topics that you're talking about, well, obviously science is speaking very confidently about them and saying we understand this and we understand that. And as a contrarian that I am, I immediately go to somebody would say religion doesn't know this. There's no way to prove it, but we have the ability to prove it now. And I would say something like, do you have the telescope? Do you have the microscope? Do you have the Large Hadron Collider? And the answer is usually no, because not many people have those in their backyard. And so it ends up being taken on faith, kind of what the other people are reporting. And so that's not necessarily to be critical. What that is to me is questioning everything. That's a big part of what I do. And this idea that you're going to have to, at some point in this timeline, make a decision of who you trust and what information you trust. And I think you said you don't know if we'll ever know. My contention is that we aren't going to know, because the thing that I think is going on, and this is just my belief set, if we knew, the ruse would be up, the gig would be up. There's a very, to me, there's a very intended anonymity to the construction of to the algorithm, the construction of the universe, that keeps, if there were a designer, cloaked. And if that were to come out, that either A, we know who the designer is, it is designed, or we know it's not a design, the whole like having to choose to believe what this thing is, would be up. It wouldn't be valid anymore. So, how do you feel? You're this sponge, a self-professed, information sponge. You're trying to get this information. You're trying to learn. How do you feel the education system going into this? I want to know this stuff. Do you feel like they did? Was it what you were hoping? Do you feel good about what you learned? Do you feel like they're kind of onto it? Do you feel like you can trust them? Just what are your thoughts on wanting to know what this information is and going into the education system and them giving it to you?
I mean, I'll keep this to the American education system, right? Because obviously I haven't seen what it's like in
from
Japan
your
or
perspective,
Switzerland.
your experience.
But I would say that I don't think that there is an inherent vast conspiracy to control the children that some cabal of dudes in a room thought of. But I think the sad result of the way modern schooling continues to work is people not thinking outside the box and not doing their own study. So that doesn't mean that if I'm in a public school and they say there are 8 planets and the sun is 93 million miles away, that somebody should, a good person will say, fuck no, it's not, I'm gonna do my own research. I mean that because it's so rigorously structured, it becomes very easy for someone who goes through K through 12 public school or even private school to get very comfortable with that. Okay, I'm gonna walk in, they're gonna tell me the things, I'm gonna memorize them, I'm gonna leave, and that doesn't leave a whole lot of room for growth. And this was something I saw my first year in undergrad. Was I came from a place where I couldn't learn or succeed, especially with ADHD, if I wasn't finding my own ways to learn and finding my own ways to retain information. So I took that kind of adaptability to college, and I started doing really well in those first few weeks because the schedule was kind of different, and you could move classes around. You don't have adults to help you with anything. You go from in the spring of your senior year in high school to being told everything about where to be and what to do to 3 months later, go figure it out. And a lot of the guys that lived in my dorm were struggling because they couldn't make that transition really smoothly. And people were coming to me and they were like, Jack, dude, how are your grades okay? Or how do I build a planner? Or because they were all thrown off and they were very used to just, you'll take this class, then this class, then this class, then this class. So I wouldn't say I distrust education as an establishment. I think it can be what we make it. However, the way that we teach people continues to be subpar because it assumes everyone's the same, which is not true.
That's good. I mean, that's a great answer, similar to your homeschooling answer. I'm a very manic person. I'm very binary in my thought, and I'm guilty of going conspiracy, non-conspiracy, and the truth being kind of somewhere in the middle. Now, I call myself a rational thinking, skeptical conspiracy theorist, so I'm not going to say that I particularly think that there is a cabal, a group of guys directing this whole thing, but I wanted to ask you intentionally to see if you felt like your pursuit of knowledge was serviced, and it sounds like it was to the level that you allowed it to. And the idea that you said it's not a conspiracy, it's human nature, is really valid. Like, it's a really valid and logical, rational way to look at it. So I'll have to consider that. I'm much more of the, Rockefeller, wanted to be involved in the education and the formation of it, and they didn't have enough people wanting to sign up for the military, and so they used the Prussian model of, if you teach a certain way, this way, and very nationalist, very sovereign, rah defend your country, that people are more likely to go to war. And I feel like I've believed, but what you said is going to make me really think about it, but I've believed that it's been directed for a couple things, and one of them is to make good citizens, and another one is to make good employees. And I don't think it particularly, if there is a controlling group of people, which this isn't necessarily the point of this discussion, a really critical thinking, capable citizenry is a threat to that. So you'd be better served having people that can't really function on their own and can't really solve problems. If you went, well, that doesn't make any sense, and I don't believe you, you can have a whole uprising or whatever. So it's easier to just kind of have, hey, trust the narrative, trust the system, and learn that in education. And my concern is that, when children are young and their subconscious is forming, that they retrain, or they train how their brain even looks for information. So rather than solving problems and being immersed in sensory, stimulation and going out and being this, think about every other species in the wild, the kids are running and playing and jumping and getting hurt and learning how to fight and learning how to whatever. And we've got our kids lined up in these little desks, and they just have to say yes and absorb the information. And it concerns me from a standpoint of, are we reaching our potential as humans? And this is whatever, I'm going to my own theory, but if everybody found out that, number one, we're all the same, exact same human species, like, obviously there's different melanin levels in skin, different structural things based on generations of labor and things like that, but we're the exact same human with the same exact experience growing up in different places. Well, then we could all be unified. A unified group of people doesn't necessarily support a military-industrial complex. If people were taught that you could affect reality with your consciousness, and potentially this reality, and this is obviously crazy conspiracy stuff, which is what I do on my channel, but consciousness is either involved with the creation of the universe, or the universe is kind of somehow created with this idea that the human consciousness affects it. People are probably going to be less likely to just accept some mundane, menial shit job and die of stress doing their job they hate. You'd be like, wow, this sucks, and I'm going to go do something dynamic. So I just think that it would benefit, if there was an elite group, it would benefit them to have the kind of people that the education system creates.
So something that I thought of was, when I say that I don't think there was, the malicious intent of the way it was built, I mean the way it continues to be. But like the modern American school system was, I'm sure somebody can fact check this for me, but if I'm correct, it was originally designed in the early 1900s to kind of work as a plant for pushing out factory workers during the Industrial Revolution, because they needed people who could be replaceable cogs in a machine that would be, in the right place at the right time to do one task and move along. And so, American schools were built to create, just hundreds of thousands of workers, because that was the kind of economy we had. So when it started, there was definitely the intent in the design, because that worked for the kind of world we lived in. What pisses me off is that we've had 100 years now. We haven't changed it. We have the means and the money to give everybody a better education. Hell, we have supercomputers and access to all of human knowledge in our pockets. We can give everybody a better education, but we choose not to, because that's not important right now. That's where this might even get political, but it's all about priorities, man. Like, we could feed every person in America if we just chose to, and we don't. We could give everybody healthcare, and we could choose to, but we don't. And it's the same with education.
Well, you're right on. And my conspiracy brain, which, a conspiracy theorist makes connections that aren't there, would say that this is intended. I like the idea that it's just out of neglect or out of apathy or out of a lack of intended progress. That's kind of what you're saying. I like that. But I would say that, in addition to making good widget makers, you make good soldiers, and it benefits this, kind of small group of people, and that it's intentionally not changing because it's working for them. Where we need to get pissed off, and one of the reasons why I'm doing this, is it's not working for us. Like,
yeah,
we are way poorer. I don't like to even use the word poor because that's like a mindset, but we are way poorer and sicker than we should be. And I don't know if you know this or not, but I don't know, I have to look at this and vet it, but what I've heard is that for the first time in recorded human history, the parents are outliving the children that are dying of natural causes, which includes suicide and overdose, but these autoimmune conditions. If you know anybody, my wife's grandma's sister had 13 children, and she's buried 8 of them.
Are you serious?
Yep, there's 5 remaining, and she's going to probably outlive them all. And I mean, that happens because, like, what used to happen is you'd have 12 kids, and one would die of polio, and one would die in the war, and the other 10 would live to be 100. Like, that's how man was for a really long, maybe 60, whatever, 80, whatever the number is. But there wasn't the diabetes and cancer and the autoimmune conditions, and I've been suffering from them myself, is the big indicator. To me, that's the canary in the coal mine. When your body is attacking yourself, when your immune system goes, something's the problem, and it's this fucking asshole, and starts attacking you. Like, that's what happened with me. Because I was working 6 days a week, stressed out of my mind, and my immune system was like, whatever, doesn't matter. So I just think that it's fine, and that's a good take to say it's happening by neglect, but I fear it's happening by intention, and I think it's because you follow the money, and who's benefiting, and you've got that group. It's got a lot of money, the kind of money that will never change, and then you've got kind of the rest of us, and that's kind of where I'm at with it. But to try and reel this back in. You feel like, just to get a final answer, that with your capacity, your intellect, that you went to school and you were able to make it pretty well. You feel good about what you taught, and you feel like the resource is there to really explore these subjects and get a sufficient answer.
Yes, for me. I don't want to sound like a hyper conservative kind of, well, anybody can make it if you just try to learn harder, because that's not true. Like, not everyone has the access that I did, or like got the scholarships that I did, or had the good teachers that I did,
or the brain.
This is true. It's a himbo brain, but sometimes it does good with the books. But I would say that on the whole, it was a good experience for me. It was 100% necessary, because for me, if I hadn't had just the right teachers or taking just the right classes when I did, some of my like deepest interests like wouldn't have taken hold. I wouldn't have Lawrence Krauss's A Universe from Nothing on my nightstand right now. So it's different for everybody, but for me, it was. I'm pleased with it.
That book is the antithesis to everything that I am. I would just like to say, Krauss. Oh. No, Krauss. Oh man, and I wanted to get to this after the break, but yeah, we will. Let's take a quick break. I got to go make a coffee. All
right.
5 minutes and we'll get back.
Good stuff.
All right, cool. We were talking about Krauss, right? Let me show you the video. I did a video on the Theanthropic Principle. You're familiar with the Theanthropic Principle, yeah?
Maybe.
It's
what do
the
you mean
idea
specifically?
That all of the constants, the everything that makes up this reality, the speed of light, the weight of the mass of protons, everything is absolutely perfect and had to be perfect in order.
The fine-tune argument, fine-tuning.
Yeah, it's called exactly the Theanthropic Principle, and they've done the math, and I don't know who they are or how they did this, but it's the chances of this coming up perfect would be the same as running. I think it's rolling a dice like 150,000 times and having them all come up with the same number. I mean, something like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I go design, and they go multiverse, right? You know the multiverse theory. It's fine. There could be unlimited universes. I'm not sure if Occam's razor would say that makes more sense than a designer. I digress. I was researching the Theanthropic Principle, and I came across this video, and you're going to love it, being a former Catholic, and I'm going to love it because it absolutely triggers me, and when I get triggered, it's entertaining. All right. This is Richard Dawkins talking with, I'm assuming, a Jesuit priest. I wanted to talk to you about that, by the way.
Okay.
You're not going to be able to see it. I'll edit it in so to see the actual video.
Yeah.
But this would be my problem, and I can't wait to discuss this with you with science.
The fundamental constants of the universe, of physics, are too good to be true. They're fine-tuned. If they were a tiny bit different, the universe wouldn't have the properties it does, and stars wouldn't have come into existence. If the gravitational constant was wrong, etc., we wouldn't be here. And some physicists invoke God to explain the fine-tuning of the universe.
This is, to me, the great God of the gaps. Right. That is what is called the Theanthropic Principle is what we're talking about. Right? What we do as scientists, we observe that the universe is made in this way. And if we changed any one of a series of 20 constants, the Planck constant, the velocity of light, the mass of the proton, the mass, if we changed any one of those by a little amount, we wouldn't be here. And that's scientifically acceptable. It's a scientific observation that does not yet have a scientific answer. But to bring in God to explain this, to me, is the great God of the gaps.
I'm still tracking, by the way.
Why do you bring in God? This is a scientific issue. Okay, God has...
I'm going to rewind that because I was an idiot and I interrupted my own video. I'm with that whole thing. Like, if you just go, well, then God here, fine. That's you saying that. It's what you believe is certainly not scientific. And I'm totally with that. Then this guy, rather than kind of leaving it at that, he expounds, and this is where this becomes problematic for me.
But to bring in God to explain this, to me, is the great God of the gaps. Because first of all, why do you bring in God? This is a scientific issue. Okay, God has no place in trying to resolve this. If God did not design it, who did? And the answer scientifically, of course, is nobody. Nature, if you want.
It sounds as though you don't want to use any kind of scientific argument which smells of gaps. That you don't want to have anything to do with that.
I agree thoroughly.
And I suppose my position would be that historically, the evidence for the existence of God or gods was always almost exactly what you're now rejecting. I mean, people looked around them, they saw the universe, they saw life, and they thought there had to be a designer. And many people still do that, and you've rightly said why they're wrong. Historically, that's the way it was. To me, that had the effect of what I call raising my consciousness as to the power of science to explain how big, complicated things that seem to require a special explanation, can actually happen by simple means from simple beginnings. It makes God seem increasingly superfluous.
All right. So he goes on. Obviously, we know Dawkins. We know Dawkins' stance. Almost like if you knew me better, I'd say, what about that really upset me? And rightly you have said where they are wrong. And that's where the term that I'm coining, the priests of the religion of science. Richard, you don't know if there's a God. Lawrence Krauss, you don't know if there's a God. Obviously, we don't know there's not a flying spaghetti monster as well. And right. I'm not saying we teach there's a God. I'm not. But science, in my opinion, needs to get better at going, this is what we know. This is what we can only speculate. And only speculating coming from a worldview of emphatically there is no designer, in my opinion, potentially precludes you from actually getting some of these right answers. Now, what I would want is neutrality, and I would want intellectual honesty, and I wouldn't want a Christian to say this was because of God and there's no other way around it, and I wouldn't want an atheist to say there is no God and you're stupid for saying it. I would want to say, we know this does this. We don't know how or why that does that. We're working on it. Leave it at that, and don't tell me what to believe, Richard. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm a little bit confused because that video, like, I thought you were about to tell me why you think the fine-tuned argument is accurate and why it's a good argument for creationism or intelligent design. But that video showed a Catholic priest actually agreeing with me in wanting to keep faith and science as pursuits separate. Yep. And Dawkins, maybe I didn't hear it the same way, but I think you're saying that you kind of agree with his point, but he says it as fact, and he says things as an indisputable fact in an arrogant way, and that's not how we should go about this.
The hubris is definitely the issue. And, you know, I'm not sure what happened with Dawkins, but I would postulate that at some point in his upbringing, he had a very negative religious experience, probably not all that dissimilar to what you've talked about a little bit with your education, like some terrible nun group, you know, hypocritical, whatever, pedophilic. Like, I don't want to get too personal in any way, but that happens a lot too. Like, if you were a guy who was sexually taken advantage of by the priest, and then later you're like have to be believing in God, that's probably not going to go very well because of what that person did. So something happened to Dawkins. I can only guess something happened where he went, God is the enemy.
He was raised in a very conservative Anglican education system and household.
There you go. And he probably saw shit that distorted his faith in humanity and attributed it to religion, which I get. Like, dude, I know the guy who was the son of the priest, and that priest beat the shit out of him, and he hates his dad, and he hates religion because his dad was the priest. And that's just like one example. There's a million of those kind of things. So to me, science loses credibility. A scientist loses its credibility when your bias affects your perception. And for Richard Dawkins to say, rightly, you have said that they're wrong. He can't know that they're wrong. And he has this like anti-God, you know, agenda. And that's my frustration. Go ahead.
Yeah, God, so many thoughts. So yeah, no, Dawkins is very much kind of an arrogant asshole. And he definitely, you know, I love his work, but he does kind of sound like a prick sometimes. But then again, a lot of militant atheists do. There's a lot of overlap between like, you know, I'm an atheist, so I wish that religion wasn't the thing because I see it as a fundamentally awful construct that has slowed us as a society and as a race.
Totally agree.
I also look at, you know, belief in supernatural beings, and I don't believe in those things, and I wish other people also didn't, because I look at belief in a higher power, and when someone says, yes, there is a God, he's real, 100%, this is his name, this is what he looks like, this is what he wants me to do, and that makes me sad, because that means that you're not thinking critically, and I don't, you know, want you to go down that path where your entire your whole morality is built around an old book that you will not even consider being wrong. But I think that, you know, at least in my experience, the scientific community is exactly what you're saying you want it to be, where it's, you know, we're pretty sure about blah, 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 but you can't say anything with 100% accuracy unless it's like, what color is the sky? It's blue. You know, what are stars made of? You know, we know, you know, that nuclear fission and so on and so forth. But then there's stuff where, you know, anybody who is honest and is an atheist will say, obviously, I won't make the statement there is no God, because that would be dishonest. Mm-hmm. So, but I'm also not going to say I'm agnostic, right? So an agnostic person is somebody who is who doesn't believe in God, but is open to it and is kind of still searching. Whereas an atheist like myself, I will say, no, I do not believe in a God. There's not enough out there for me to have reason to. But I still won't make the statement there isn't one, because I can't disprove that. So, like, if I cannot scientifically disprove it, I'm not going to make that statement. But since I don't believe in a God, that's still going to shape my worldview, if that makes sense. So it's I don't know if it's totally a bias as much. I don't know if it's a bias as much as it is just what you believe or do not. Because nobody's.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, you.
All right. Because nobody's born religious. Like, you come out of the womb an atheist because you don't have a belief in something. And then the system.
So agnostic.
Well, whatever a baby would identify as.
We gotta get one on the line.
Oh God.
We gotta get a baby on the line.
Oh, for sure. So we'll just call Hillary Clinton's cabal and get her with.
No, don't poke
anyway,
the bear.
You're born an atheist. If you and your family,
agnostic.
Grew up isolated on an island, just like the three of you, mom, dad, kid, and you were never exposed to any of the belief systems anywhere, and you were just like, yes, the world is what there is, you don't have a belief system. But if you're like me and you get raised in a Catholic household, you get indoctrinated while your brain is still forming, and you basically train children to have a view of the nature of the universe from the time they're 3 years old. And when you're that young, being told, hey kid, you have the secrets to the universe in your hands, and it's called the Bible, that's going to stick with you. So when that goes away, saying I'm an atheist, it's not like I believe in atheism. There's a lack of belief system because I discarded the indoctrination from before.
Okay. That was the hardest I've ever, this is the hardest not talking I've ever done. So that was out of respect for you and your intellect, and thank you for that. And it's good stuff. I wanted to clarify about the agnostic thing because I don't think a baby would come out believing there is no God. And you said, I believe I don't believe in God. And I think that's different than saying I believe there is no God. Regardless, I don't think a baby comes out and goes, there is no God. So I think a baby's agnostic with the definition. Now, you said the word indoctrination, which is a hot spot for me. I got a shirt that I'm making. This is the definition of indoctrination: the process of teaching a person or group to accept a set of beliefs uncritically. And the example is, I would never subject children to religious indoctrination. And then you said, children grow up with this universe in their hands, the Bible, and that's what you teach them to believe. Mm-hmm. What do you think they're raised to believe now? What do you think that they go to school and they're taught and they're indoctrinated with, in my opinion? Are they given a neutral worldview? Are they taught, we're not sure what happened, it's confusing, reality is complicated, we know how things work, this is how this works, you go figure it out?
I think that it should be phrased better when you're teaching people how to learn. So, like, let's say you're in public school. You're in school, you're in high school, and you're learning F equals MA, force equals mass times acceleration, right? And that is, that's math. That's a fact. That's just what it is, right? That's something that won't change because that's a universal law. But people can't distinguish that from something more complicated, like how many planets are there or how big is the universe, stuff that changes the more we learn. Like the Higgs boson wasn't even discovered or confirmed to exist until 2013. So anybody who was learning about it in school up until 2013 should have been told there's a particle that has been theorized called the Higgs boson, but we have not found it yet. But I promise you, somebody along the way heard it wrong and was like, oh, that's a fact. Yeah, there's Higgs boson because it was in the science book. So I think that there's definitely overall, in just most people in general, there's a lack of an ability to think critically because it's hard to distinguish what are the facts I'm getting in school and then what is we know mostly this thing in school. Does that make sense?
Oh, it does. They don't think critically, in part because of them being in school and their brains literally being trained to not think critically. And then they're also indoctrinated. So I think that you have people having a hard time disseminating truth from non-truth. And that's really a big platform of mine. What I want to do, I would love to, if before I die, draw the line. Obviously, this is a huge idea and that's not going to happen, but draw the line where it's science and we know, and it's speculation and we believe. And it would definitely, I think if we looked critically at how children are taught about the nature of reality and what they are, you would have a hard time arguing that they weren't indoctrinated with the theory of evolution as 100% fact. And I mean, I was a kid and I remember, this is a long time ago, I told you last year I went to school, writing what year BC dinosaurs, what year BC man, evolved to this and that and this, and then filling out the timeline. And trust me, at 7, 8 years old, I figured they knew exactly what they were talking about because I had no reason not to trust them. And it wasn't until later in my life where I went, I'm not sure. And we haven't gotten into my story, but after a bunch of trauma in my life, I walked away from God entirely. My father was murdered. My mom died of cancer. It was terrible stuff. And my mom was like this religious fanatic. And so low-hanging fruit was leaving God. Like, if he's real, he's an asshole. I'm out. Yeah. And ironically for me, it was science that brought me back in. And it was actually looking at the moon. I was looking at the moon and I'm like, wow, the moon and the sun are the same size from the earth. That's really unlikely. Like, I would argue, I don't know the math, you may, in the vastness of the universe, if you had two bodies of different size in the sky from the perspective of a planet, I'm not sure if the odds are even there with the amount of stars and planets we have for that to happen anywhere else in the universe, where the sun and the moon would be different sizes and the same size perspective-wise from the Earth. And then the moon is made of reflective dust, and it goes through a 30-day cycle, like an app on your phone. You can look up at the moon and figure out what day of the month it is. So I was like, all right, maybe there's a God or designer and religion sucks. And that's kind of what I started on this thing. But I would say that rather than schooling being agnostic and just saying we don't know, I feel like that it's definitely taught from the perspective of they know, it's proven, it's 100%. We've had access to the resources or whatever to prove this thing, and you need to believe it because it's we know it. And this is where I get in the whole like priests of the religion of science thing. I feel like it's not all that dissimilar to what religious people used to do.
So the big difference between science as a process and as a field versus religious beliefs, philosophically or as a political organization, is that if you are a firm Muslim, 100% you are a Muslim, right? The Quran is your guide, Allah is your God. It's all correct. And I come to you and I say, hey, if I show you this thing that disproves this part of your book, will you accept this evidence that you might be wrong? The 9 times out of 10, the answer is no. I will not, because my book is fact. But if you walk up to Richard Dawkins and you say, hey man, we just found a fossil in New Mexico that completely breaks down the theory of evolution as far as we understand it, because we found this fossil in the rock in the wrong time period and it completely threw everything off. He's going to say, fuck, we need to relook that entire thing. A good scientist, and science as a study, changes over time and is capable of accepting new information. We saw this happening in real time, last March, when they were saying, before we understood COVID very well and how it was transmitted, scientists were saying, hey, don't take masks, don't use masks. We have to let the nurses and doctors, and they need to have them first. So don't wear masks. And then a month later, they said, no, everyone needs to have a mask, because it was a month later when the general scientific consensus was it is an airborne disease. You can put it out by, just breathing. Therefore, everyone has a mask, will be okay. And the Trump people and the people politicized, the sickness said, oh, so now it's this thing. Why do you keep changing your story? Well, that's not what it is. Science is always learning more, and it adapts to new information, and it acknowledges when it's wrong. Like we acknowledge that the earth wasn't flat. Yes, good science will acknowledge when it's wrong, but religion will never, ever say that it was wrong.
I agree. And that's a good point for you. Not that this is like an official debate, but I would like to, you said Dawkins, and I think that was a bad example, because I think if God came down and slapped him in his stupid, arrogant mouth, he would still deny God. Okay. So
I don't know.
But if a neutral scientist came down, or no, if a neutral scientist was there and looking at the information, they should be able to change it. But my argument would be, have you looked into the soft tissue in dinosaur bones?
Me?
Yeah. Sorry, that was confusing. Yeah. Have you personally looked into... You got Google right there, right?
Yeah.
Can you Google soft tissue found in dinosaur bones?
All right, 2015, scientists find soft tissue in 75-million-year-old dinosaur bones.
How is it possible?
Disappear. Okay, so what's the question now?
So no scientist that I know of, any like accredited, bona fide scientist, looked at that and said, well, maybe we're wrong about the time frame. Guess what they all did? Guess what they'll all do? Most likely what you're doing right now, trying to fit it into your worldview, instead of letting the actual data speak for itself and go, you know what? Vascular tissue doesn't stay around for 300 million years. It's not. That's the laws of physics. Entropy will dictate that is not going to happen. But rather than, like you said in your example just now, which was a good scientist would look at that and go, well, maybe I was wrong. You're going to find dozens and dozens of articles of scientists just explaining how it happened, not looking at the data and going, well, that's weird. That makes us rethink the whole thing. It's literally this is how it happened. And they came up with all these experiments, and they think it's something or some sort of iron phenomenon in the blood. Maybe the dinosaurs had a virus. Nothing is about like, well, maybe it's, not only is there not a single article that says maybe dinosaurs were here a lot more recently than we thought. They say things like, good scientists know that there's no way. Like, literally, I've got a video I could show you of a guy debunking the whole thing, being, the dinosaurs are younger, and none of it's not scientific. It's just supporting a worldview. And that's where I have an issue. If I use my limited understanding of science, which we'll do here in a minute, to justify my worldview, I will say that's my belief. I believe that. When science purports itself to be, we figured this out, believe it or else, and even kind of bully you, right? Like I was bullied a lot. I'm 5'7", and I don't like being bullied. And they'll say, you have to believe this shit, or you're not smart. You don't get it. You don't get it. And that's where I lose my credibility for the system. And am I saying that dinosaurs were here 30,000 years ago? I'm saying I don't know, because I fucking wasn't here. I don't know. Man wasn't here.
Yeah.
I would argue that they don't know. And if you look at carbon dating, and I'm not a young Earth creationist per se. I'm an agnostic when creation happened. I think that man started reading and writing. You would know this better than me, about 10,000 years ago, right? All around the world at the same time, somehow. Figure that out evolutionarily, anthropologically. They just all started, like everywhere in the world, they just started reading and writing at the same time. From that moment till now, I feel pretty good about the record. Before that, you're looking at dead things, rocks, layers, and you're just making your best guess. Unfortunately, probably based on your worldview. There's such substantial evidence that the Grand Canyon was formed by a flood. And I say that to you, and I promise you, your brain goes, no fucking way. I know there's no way that's what caused the Grand Canyon. But do me a favor, Google real fast, canyons on Mars formed by floods.
I don't even have to, because like I believe you that there are probably canyons on Mars and on Earth that have been formed by floods. Like that is a thing that can happen, because a flood is just a mass erosion event that happens all at once, as opposed to a slow erosion event like the Colorado River slowly eroding, northern Arizona. But I'm not going to look at something that happened on another planet and say, well, it was possible there, therefore it had to have happened here. Well, if the geology tells us that it was a slow erosion event, then it was. Of course, once again, the line between fact and, probably true is always gray, because you can be 99.9% sure, like the entire scientific community is, that the Big Bang happened, but you still can't technically say 100%. We teach it because it's the best guess, being it's very close to 100%, but you'll never get there the same way you can with 2 + 2 = 4.
And if you any class taught with that exact premise, with that disclosure, I'm fine with 100%. And I would like to see a place where it doesn't matter if it's in an astronomy class or a theoretical physics class, whatever, where they start off and they go, we're learning some really cool new stuff. You guys keep your minds together, entertain any possibility, because we're trying to crack a code here and we're not sure what it's going to be. So do DMT and sit there with your book. I'm not a hallucinogenics guy. I've never done it myself, but let's figure some shit out. Let's get excited. Like, I feel like the Ouroboros that is the information stream of the science community is so busy swallowing its own tail to defend itself that they've lost the ability to critically think, or it was engineered out of them. And that's my frustration. Like, let's leave what we know. Science is what we know. The things that we're not sure of, let's just say that's what we believe this. Like, dude, I believe this is so powerful. It is so much more honest than I fucking know this.
Yeah.
Right? I believe this. I know this. Like that, when you start getting into like empirical truths, you could, dude, you're a smart guy. You could basically, we don't know if yesterday was real, right? We just don't know. Sure. Like, let's stay in what we know. And then when we don't know, let's just say we believe this. And when science says we believe this, you're not going to hear from me. Promise.
Yeah. It's the line is so tricky, because there's a big difference between I believe the earth is hollow and I believe the sun is 93 million miles away. Those are both I believe statements, but one of them is valid if that makes sense. And one of them is
totally,
a crock.
Yeah, one of them's we have the ability to potentially prove, or our best information says that we got a good feel for it. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So the way it's phrased and shit is tricky. And it also doesn't help that the general public does not have a good understanding of what the words hypothesis and theory mean. So like, for example, whenever I really first started to kind of like break with my parents, because they trained us as children not to believe that evolution was a thing. They said, there's no way. That's absolutely not true. The scientists are lying. They just don't want you to believe in God, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, well, Mom, the science actually lines up, and it's good evidence, and the experiments make sense. And so far, like, this looks like it's the most probable way that things came to be. And she was like, yeah, well, it's just a theory, Jack. It's just a theory. I was like, Mom, gravity is also just a theory. Do you know what the word theory means? Like, a theory is a more or less verified set of hypotheses that explain a phenomenon. So if just because something is a theory that is accepted by the scientific community, it's the closest thing we have to being sure, but doesn't mean it's 100%, because the theory of gravity is a theory. The theory of evolution is a theory. But that line between empirical truths, philosophy, science, etc., is just really tricky for a lot of people to navigate, and that results in things not getting taught the way they should. Because everything should be taught as, here's what we know, here's what we don't know, go fill in these gaps. Like, people don't get told to go fill in the gaps. They either get told, if they're in a Christian household, it's just God, or they get told, don't worry about it, you're not smart enough to do that anyway.
Yep.
Fuck that.
Which is why we, either you and I literally or you and I metaphorically, are going to fix this shit. We're going to fix it, because we've been in this system for so long that only the privileged elite few have the ability, have the voice, right? It was only Justin Bieber that could have 150,000 followers, and guess who can have 150,000 followers now? A guy who's funny and is just dynamic, and you don't need an agent. Like, we don't need an agent for fucking science anymore, dude. We don't need an agent for religion anymore. Everybody on my TikTok, go ahead.
This is where I break with you and want to be careful with what I say, because like, if you need an agent usually, or someone to guide you, or a reason for being famous, if you're like a Kardashian or a Bieber or whatever, right? And it used to be like, if you don't have a specific thing that you got famous for, whether it be singing or dancing or making a sex tape, then you don't get an audience. TikTok is an app that allowed everybody who, whether right or wrong, earned one, to earn one. However, when it comes to scientific education, I'm not going to discount, having a PhD in theoretical physics, because the guy with the PhD in theoretical physics who can draw out, Maxwell's equations on a board blindfolded from memory, I'm going to trust him when he and I are talking about, supersymmetry or whatever, more than I am just,
of course, me,
guy
just
like
say me, because you or me, whoever.
Exactly. Because, you still have to know things like math, which I'm terrible at. I want everyone who saw my video to understand something. Stop asking me to help you on your physics tests. I do not do well in math. I can't help you there. Stop it. I've gotten a lot of messages about that. Stop it. I'm going to go to the guy who is the scientist and, understands the fundamentals and the specifics of their field. But I think where that's an issue for you is because you've seen so many people who do have those credentials abuse them.
Yeah, that's well said. And I would agree, when it comes to black and white, the guy who's done the research needs to be the authority. When it comes to colors, when it comes to ideas, when it comes to general concepts, you don't need the validation. As a matter of fact, I was in golf course management for years and years and years, and I had to go to all this stupid business meetings, seminars, and stuff. And there's a practice, I forget. I don't mean to marginalize that industry. I'm sorry. Stupid for me. Stupid isn't the right word. Really hard for me as somebody with ADD and doesn't want to be controlled to suffer. So I'm going to correct what I said there. But there's a saying for a certain business practice where, let's just say in computing, in software, code writing, they can't figure out a problem. And so they bring in an expert from the medical field, and he looks at it from a non-biased, a fresh set of eyes. Mm-hmm. This is what sharing best practices. This is what we've done here. Try this. And they go, holy shit, we would have never figured that out ever in 1,000 years. And then it can go, obviously, the same thing in the medical industry, the software guy, whatever. Those are just examples. But I think that if you are the theoretical physicist that has those numbers, you can be bogged down by how specific your skill set is, and you could be limited in your perception because it's so specific to this thing you've been working on. And it's very possible that somebody from another, trade would really benefit you. And that's kind of where I want to be. And like, I mean, keep talking about myself, but why I want to have this discussion is like, you and I having this discussion has such a potential to kind of find common ground compared to, there's a guy named Kent Hovind, if you're familiar. He's the young earth creationist guy that everybody hates. Richard Dawkins. Those two guys, imagine those two in a room. If they didn't end up in a fist fight, then they're both frauds. They're absolutely the opposite people. So, but we can have these discussions, and maybe, like you've said a couple things today that I'm putting in the bank as I got to think about that. That's a valid point. And, I'm not saying that I'm trying to persuade you in the same way, but I think this is where I just think that the access to the information isn't restrained anymore by, this idea of this guy makes it to his level. And this is where I'll be a conspiracy theorist. This guy makes it to this level, therefore he's the voice on this one thing, whether it's Neil deGrasse Tyson. And is he theoretical physics, or he's mainly
astrophysics and cosmology. Okay. Yeah.
Yep. So you go to him. He's the guy. Well, real easy to control the narrative if it's a guy doing that. And that's where, as conspiracy theorists, I would say that, you end up with these establishment endorsed individuals who are just going to say what works for for these whatever elite guys. And I get that with what you said very rationally, that's probably not happening. Well, so that's probably not happening, but that's what I've always kind of thought is these guys are going to say what they're supposed to say. We can now talk and share information and break the mold. And that's a big hope of mine, because I would say, just like you said about homeschooling being this thing where it's specific to the user, right? The truth, homeschool kids can turn out weird. Public education kids can turn out weird. How does the user do it? I would venture to say that with where we're at on other sides of the spectrum with what we believe, the truth is probably somewhere in the middle. They're probably just like the homes. It's probably not what I think. It's probably not what you think. It's probably something in the middle. And that something is probably a computer simulation, which I wanted to get to this earlier, but I think that's where we go.
Okay, so hold that.
Okay.
We're going to do the simulation shit, but I got to get this thought out. So when you're talking about access to information, this is a rant I could go on for hours, but I'll try to keep it brief.
Okay.
The internet and the ability for people like you and me to have these conversations without a Neil or a Ken Ham or a Richard Dawkins or a Jesus jumping in and saying, no, it's me, I'm right. It's great. And that's a gift. The fact that ideas can be exchanged like this. I think it opens so many doors for, chill out.
I can't get past Neil and Ken Ham and Jesus in the room saying who's right. It's such a good mental picture. It's so good. All right, I'll let that go. That was good. Keep going.
The fact that there is an app like TikTok that brought us together because I had, some sciencey words to say, but also jokes and shit. And then we can discuss these things.
It was the sciencey words.
But I think that this access to information and knowledge also presents humanity with a massive challenge.
Absolutely.
And that sounds deep for no reason, but it's because there's so much access to information. It means that even the people who don't know what to do with it can access it. And that's how you get people who stormed the Capitol because their side of the internet told them that this crazy thing was happening when it wasn't, and they believed it, and they spread that information. A bunch of people get locked at home because of coronavirus, and there's a very high correlation between when lockdown started and when people got bored, and QAnon and conspiracy, actually violent, dangerous conspiracy. There's a difference, you know what I mean? Spiking. Because,
just to clarify, I had to talk down a lot of my friends in the conspiracy realm because QAnon was always a psyop to me. I was, but I had to talk because they were buying into it, and I know what that was, and I tried to talk my friends down from some of those discussions.
Yeah, that shit's dangerous, and I think that's an example of when it goes wrong. When access to information is an inherently good thing, but people use it dangerously and irresponsibly. They assume that because they have equal access, that information has equal value. And that's not true. Because if I get an article from, the Associated Press. Associated Press is reporting on a thing that is happening. I'm going to look at that. I'm going to go, yeah, I probably trust this because this is a purely center information-based news outlet. And if InfoWars tries to release a report about the same thing, I'm going to say, no, that's less valuable information, most likely, because that is not a reputable, trustworthy news source. That is a biased news source. So information is equally accessible, but it's never equally valuable. And the amount of people who don't see that scares me.
I totally agree. And basically the idea is that information is a megaphone on the human condition, right? Same thing as like people who drink. If some people that drink, it brings out that they're actually a terrible, awful person. Some people that drink, you know, it brings out that they're a good person. So it's really, I mean, what I find having done this research for so long is it ends up being kind of, I don't want to say fractal. That almost sounds like new agey or something, but it ends up being microcosmic, which I don't know if that's a word. I'm sure you can correct me there too, but these things are a microcosm of a specific condition that is an individual condition, and then a family condition, and then a county condition, and then a state condition, and you just end up with this kind of fractal idea. And so, you know, this thing with humanity and the internet, it's like pure power, right? In Gollum's ring, and it's pure. And so good people are going to make good on it, and bad people are going to make bad on it. And it's just what humans do. I mean, we're pretty dangerous. So I agree. What's funny is that where I said, you know, I'm Mr. Glass. So remember that, but where I'm not a fan of Alex Jones, because you got to understand, when I was doing this 20 years ago, there wasn't many voices, and he was a guy that I listened to, and, you know, he's all fired up or whatever. And probably 2005, I went, dude, this is just too sensationalist and political for me. And I checked out on the guy. But I totally distrust the AP. So in our Mr. Glass and Bruce Willis thing, like I would almost be the opposite. Like if it's AP, I would really question it. And if it was Alex Jones, I would, you know, probably give it some credibility, only because I would want to see it. Now I know he did the whole Sandy Hook thing, and this isn't me endorsing Alex Jones particularly. It's me saying that how funny bias is, and why I think this is a good conversation is not why. There's a lot of reasons I think it's a good conversation, but I literally, what that example you gave, I'm really leery of the AP. I'm really leery of the mainstream media in for the same manic, schizophrenic, you know, reasons of the things that we've talked about, where, you know, I think there's a cabal and a ruling elite, and you know, I think they've been doing it for a long time, and that's just what I believe. And I you know, what's crazy about confirmation bias is if we wanted to take the conversation that way, which we don't, because we have much more interesting things to talk about, I could bring out 2 hours worth of proofs that would be hard to dispute, and we would get nowhere because it doesn't really matter if there is or not. But I am leery of here's what I'll say about it, and then I'll forfeit this discussion, this part of the discussion. I'm leery of a group of people who, when John F. Kennedy was shot and the Zapruder film came out later, and in the you've seen the Zapruder film, yeah? Where Kennedy gets his head blown off?
Yeah.
What, can you give me your best, what you think, what happens to Kennedy when his head gets hit? Give me your, was it forward or back? Which way did his head go?
Snap backwards.
He goes like this, right? He goes.
Yeah.
So if the shot came from behind, it's hard to explain ballistically, but my point is, in the tape, which came out years, decades later, Geraldo Rivera released it as a conspiracy show, like 20 to 30 years later, whatever. Dan Rather, there's a video of Dan Rather in black and white reporting to the American people what he saw with the Zapruder film. Not what he saw the day of, but after the assassination happened. And he goes, and then the third shot hit. And you can see the president's head go violently forward. I figured I was going to hit that. And he does it again, violently forward. And this is a guy who watched the Zapruder film, and his head clearly went back. But the narrative was that he got shot from the back, right? So he had to say that. So I'm leery of a group of people that would say that.
Huh.
And that's CBS, right? Which, I'll go quick conspiracy theory on you real fast. CBS, what's their logo?
Oh, Jesus Christ. It's an eye. It's an eye.
Columbia Broadcasting System. You've done research. Who's Columbia? Anyways, I have a documentary about that. It doesn't matter. I'm going to try and find this for you real quick. I want to show you this, and then we'll move on. Where is it? Here it is. Let me fast forward.
An amateur photographer to offer aid or ask the president something over him in a protective position. In the next instant, but this time this is Kennedy apparently looking on. A second shot, the third total shot, hit the president's head. His head could be seen to move violently forward.
Mm-hmm.
And Mrs. Kennedy stood up immediately.
It didn't go violently forward. It went violently backwards. Literally the opposite of what he said.
And I mean, like, I see something like that and Dan Rather saying that shit, and I go, that's weird. But that isn't like enough for me to, think, oh God.
Say the AP's bad.
The network has the same symbol as like above the pyramid on the dollar, hashtag national treasure. There's a lot of things that I see. I kind of just go, that's weird. Like, I'm not going to say that thing you just showed me is fake. Like, you faked that Dan Rather video.
Yeah.
I'm just, okay, yeah, Dan Rather said that. I just saw him say that.
Which is why you are a calm, successful person with ADD, and I'm a manic maniac. I moved to Maine. I moved from Colorado to Maine to be on an acre and to raise chickens, and I'm literally the definition of a maniac now. So good
I don't know,
on you.
You seem pretty chill for somebody who's questioning JFK's assassination and the AP.
I'm pretty sure that we could have this discussion for hours, and I actually am interested in potentially doing this again, and we could go down a rabbit hole. I've done probably 100 hours of research on almost any conspiracy you can imagine. I know, obviously, Flat Earth is a fucking joke, and anybody who subscribes to that is a maniac. Well, the bad kind of maniac, though, not the ones that live in Maine. QAnon was a psyop, but I have a conspiracy to explain both of those. Oh, and by the way, that reminds me of what I actually want to talk about instead of conspiracies. I just was in a TikTok discussion with a guy. It was a Christian video that came up, and I'm kind of trolling Christian TikTok videos. God forgive me. But just Christians are so like your standard going to church on Sunday Christian.
Oh boy.
They just don't get it, man. They just
Nope.
You've read the Bible, right?
Yep.
What day are you supposed to worship God?
The Sabbath.
Saturday.
The Sabbath, yeah.
Yeah, it's the fourth commandment. I'm not great at math, but that's pretty high up there, right? It's like, don't kill. Actually, don't worship another god. Don't kill. Maybe don't lie.
The order actually varies a little bit between Protestants and Catholics sometimes. So I think the order I know is different. But it's like, I think it goes, thou shalt not worship any other gods before me. And then it's thou shalt not take the Lord thy God's name in vain. The third one is, oh God. That I'm pretty sure is Sabbath, and then fourth is parents, fifth is kill, etc. But
it's way up there. So, and they go to church on Sunday, right? And then they have a Christmas tree in their fucking church, and that's pagan.
100%.
Whatever. It doesn't. I mean, that's a whole. I mean, we could do. Whatever. The whole Catholicism, Christian thing, whatever. So, anyways, I'm in this Christian video. I don't know how it came up or whatever. And it was a guy that does Bible stuff, and I had listened to a couple things he said, and he basically came out and said that the earth is flat. And I said, it's not flat, you guys. You make us all look really bad.
God.
But I tried to be diplomatic as I do, and I said, the shape doesn't matter. It's probably not flat. The shape doesn't matter. And the guy comes back on, I almost want to show it to you, and he says, the shape, oh my God, this is so embarrassing. The guy basically said the shape does matter. It's definitely flat. God is above us. Like, it almost he has to be like a troll.
What the fuck?
He's above the dome. This is what woke me up and saved me. And I told my wife, I said, well, he's fucking, that sucks. Cause when he found God because it doesn't matter. So I said, the shape doesn't matter. And in particular, I said to him, Jesus says that the kingdom of heaven is in your heart. Directionality doesn't matter. That was my response, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where in the Bible does it say it doesn't matter? So to me, the shape doesn't matter. I think it's a globe. I think it makes the most sense. But I think the reason why the shape doesn't matter is we're probably in a video game, and the shape is potentially, that quantum physics collapses the wave, and no one else has ever said this that I know of, and I'm curious to see if you're going to track or want to throw stones at me with this, which is why we're doing this behind the glass, because I didn't want you to hit me with a rock.
Yes, of course, yes.
If we're in a video game and reality is being rendered just outside of the user, the whole idea of if a tree falls in the woods and nobody's there to hear it, does it make a sound? The answer is the tree doesn't exist except for only its potentiality in the software coding, and it only becomes real when the person's close enough for it to render, right? That's the short, easy answer for that. The shape of the earth could literally have only become relevant when we started to come off the earth. And I'm not saying that's what happened. I'm saying that if the greatest conspiracy, which is why I gravitated this thing, the greatest conspiracy hands down is us being in a video game. It's the mother of all conspiracies. So
I wouldn't
Why
say
don't
it's so much like a conspiracy as it is somewhere between theoretical physics and philosophy.
Yes, very good.
It's like that is like a perfectly valid hypothesis to have. I mean, like if someone came to me and was like, my hypothesis is that the moon is made of cheese, I'd say, no, that is actually that is falsifiable. There, you're wrong. But if you came to me and said, hey, my hypothesis is we live in a video game, and I'd go, damn, that's interesting. Tell me more about it. Like, why do you think that? So I wouldn't call it a conspiracy so much as a nice. So much as just, it's an idea that has popped up in the last 20 years and has become a really big talking point. I think it's fascinating, but I'm not necessarily in the camp that leans towards we are. I don't agree with Elon Musk, but I don't have like a super hard stance on it either.
Okay, that's a good. Okay, so I'll try and.
If you want, like, I know that I actually typed out my answer to that question because in your notes you sent me, have I looked into the idea that our reality is a computer simulation? Is there any validity to it? What are the chances that it explains the subjects I'm studying? So I have a few thoughts. I don't necessarily believe or not believe in it. I don't think I've studied it enough, but I would say that I lean towards I don't think we're in a simulation, because if the theory, and if I understand it properly, if the theory is that computing power will continuously improve.
Yeah, Moore's law.
Exactly. Every 18 months it doubles. Transistors keep getting smaller. Our computing power went from Pong 40 years ago to the VR that's right over there on my wall pretty quickly. So obviously we're going to get to a point where we can simulate consciousness. And if that's like the fate of the growth of computers, then therefore moving your consciousness into a simulation or creating simulations with living things will just keep happening, because then that next level down will make a simulation, next one down will make a simulation, and it goes on for possibly an infinitum and ad infinitum. That would be it.
Yeah, I struggle with that word too. Infinitum. I don't know what it is, honestly.
And if you're going to look at like a row of all the different universes that have created each other, and if you throw a dart, odds are you're going to hit one that is a simulation. Therefore, ours is a simulation. Here's my problem with that, though. If I'm, we're living right now in 2021 in, Earth number 317b, whatever the hell you want to call it, this one,
mm-hmm.
and this is a reality where we have not yet developed the ability to run a simulation that powerful. We therefore either have to be currently the most recent software update or the very first one. And the odds that we're either the first one or the last one are extremely small, because it would be in 1 in a trillion, like the theory says. So I think it's more likely that this idea is, while super duper cool, is more of a result of our constant need to understand things. And like when computers popped up, that's when this idea popped up. 100 years ago, nobody would have said we're living in a simulation, because a simulation wasn't even an idea somebody could think, like, was really thinking about. And what I look at is like, well, in 100 years, what piece of technology is going to exist that doesn't exist now that's going to make us say, wait, no, our reality is this thing?
Absolutely.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, Plato in the cave. Like, yeah. Absolutely. I will. Do you want to elaborate? I've got my first response is actually your boy Neil deGrasse Tyson.
My only last thing that I want to get out, because I wrote it down, was that as an idea or as a theory, it's super cool, and like I will 100% support studying it and talking about it because it's dope. There's a part of it that worries me, though, which is when it starts to play the same role as God of the Gaps, because it kind of functions as a sort of diet creationism, where if there's something
that diet, God.
Yeah, like where if there's something that we can't explain, it's, a Christian will say, well, it was God's plan. And then if you are into the simulation idea, you might say, oh, relativity and quantum mechanics don't agree. That's a simulation. And that worries me, because it becomes kind of another crutch in a way.
Dude, you are so all over it. Nice work. I mean, virtual golf clap, because that was good. In particular, the second part. I literally earlier in the conversation, you were going to say gravity is a theory. And I was going to say that I've discovered what gravity was. And like, I'm probably more important than Isaac Newton, because he figured out that it was a thing. but I know what it is. And I was going to say that it's math. And the reason why you can't see it is because it's not real from our perspective. And just like if you tried to convince Mario that he had no gravity, there's no gravity in Mario Land. He jumps and the algorithm says to come down. There's no actual force, which is why we don't see the force. And I was going to say gravity is easily explainable to the simulation theory, which is so funny because you said God of the gaps. By the way, diet creation is brilliant. And you
Copyright,
said that,
trademark.
Yeah, it's great. Seriously. I have a trademark. I tried to trademark who is the programmer and where's the computer, because that you talked about philosophy. It's like a very philosophic, theologic idea. And that's kind of where I went in it. But, I was literally going to say what you just said, which is people are going to use it as an explanatory power, as the gaps thing. So it's funny that you did that. Now, you got to see what your boy Neil says here. And remember, dude.
I used to think we were living in a simulation. Then I talked to some colleagues, did some more reading, and now I feel a little better that we're probably not. The argument for it was you get a real universe, and then people in there get really smart, and they program computers, and they create worlds. And the people in that world don't know that they're fake. All right. And then they evolve and they develop computers and they create a world and they create a world. And this goes all the way down. And so there's the real world and all the worlds that can create worlds, except the last one, which is still working on it. Eventually they'll get there. All right. Throw a dart. Chances are you're going to hit a world that's simulated.
Holy shit.
That's us.
Yeah.
But we don't know how to make an actual simulated world where everybody thinks it's real. So either we're the last of those worlds that's still working on it, or we're the first one, which is actually real. I'm good with it. I used to think we were living.
So I hate to tell you, you're a non-player character in a video game, and that you're just rehearsing your programming. I'm kidding. But I mean, to me, that's that when you said it, obviously I was like, wow, Neil said that recently. Neil was one of the guys who turned me on to it because he had a symposium with James Gates. And it was really, the first time they really started talking about it with theoretical physics and the idea that the universe, the algorithm of the universe is explainable. The way that the cosmology is explainable is the same coding that is used for a search engine. So that was way back then. I got me into it. And for him to say there is none, I rather than what I may have done in the past, which is go, bummer, it's not a thing. I went, Neil deGrasse Tyson's full of shit. So here's how I want to talk about that. Yes, and this is my point about not being able to get the right answer once you dismiss the idea of intelligence or some sort of supernatural force. If this happened by chance, it evolved into place, man got to a place technologically that they can make a simulation, then that repeats over and over and over and over. And that is the deduction that you come up with in it's material philosophy. And you said it exactly right. And you are trained educationally. You learned a version of what he teaches and or learns. So I don't blame you for coming up with that. And I think that is the end result of running this algorithm, of running this program. That's it. It's a turtle. So this is where I say that there has to be an original, a causative force, as ground zero. There has to be some sort of something that we can't explain outside of this reality. And this is where I embrace the idea of the Big Bang, because if I go back to Mario, if you were to ask Mario where he came from, if you were to say, hey, Mario, where did you, when, where and when, there's no way he could conceive it in his video game system. That his world was created by these brilliant Japanese software engineers who built this code, and a guy who was a mechanical engineer who built the actual physical Nintendo, and then it was connected through a power line into the power grid, and that's connected to to Fukushima, let's say.
Yeah.
And how could Mario get that? He can't get that. He can't get that. There's no way he could there's no way in his digital 2D 8-bit world he could put that together. So what he would do is he'd go, fuck, I don't know. And that's kind of what I want science to do. But looking at it from his perspective, guess what? There was a Big Bang. There was a Big Bang.
So my question to you is, and your answer will determine whether or not what you just said is like, yeah, that's a good, or hocus pocus. So like,
so no pressure.
When you say that, the analogy being, we are Mario, there's things probably happening we can never explain because things are happening on a higher level that we don't understand at all. Is that your argument for yes, we are Mario, or is that you simply saying it's possible?
I mean, I know by answering this, you're going to want to end the discussion or whatever, but I believe that, like, if you want to, I've showed myself as fairly crazy. The best way that I think we could explain this reality is that our consciousness isn't a part of this reality per se. You said earlier a system had to develop the ability to be able to create consciousness. I don't think we'll be able to do that. I think our consciousness exists in whatever this place is called other. There's a theoretical physicist named Fred something. Who is the programmer, where's the computer guy, brilliant old guy at the end of his career. And he basically says that this simulation, the computer is is a place he calls other. It's not in this reality. And I would say that whatever, you've studied religion, whenever this idea of the spiritual world, the supernatural world, this world just outside of you that we can't perceive, this place is where the computer is. That place is where our consciousness is. There's this simulation, and we are routed into these bodies as avatars. Just like in the movie Avatar, the handicapped guy, gets in the tube and now he's driving the alien around. I slightly believe, and when I say that, I mean, like, I'm like 51-49 here, right? I'm not like fanatic about this, but my best guess of trying to reconcile all of this. So our consciousness is connected into this through some sort of wireless technology. I mean, shit, it could be fucking Bluetooth or like Bluetooth 2.0, whatever. And you're in this simulation and you do the dumb shit you do for your whole life, and then you die and you end up, your consciousness continues in that plane. And that's where I would believe you're probably held accountable. And, that's where, like, I understand the idea of God or whatever, but I've been reviewed every year of my career for the performance that I did. That's like a part of human nature. How did you do? Did you do this? Did you steal? Did you win? Did you get, like, I could see us doing that. And then I would like to think that the simulation that we're in, this experience that we have, determines our eligibility for whatever the next thing would potentially be. Totally postulation. Obviously, I wouldn't stick my flag in it. Shouldn't say that, but that's kind of like where I'm at with it. Now, as far as us being Mario, what I think is that from our perspective, the Big Bang doesn't make any sense because everything came from nothing. And from our perspective, it did come from nothing. And from Mario's perspective, his whole universe came from nothing, but it didn't come from nothing. It came from software programmers. It came from the power grid. It came from a human being hitting the power button. And every time Mario starts his game, it's the Big Bang for him. And if, like 50 First Dates, you'd have to tell him this every time, which obviously doesn't work. But I rather think that that's akin to what this is. Now, what you said is exactly right. Also, that, not exactly right, but I totally agree with the idea that this makes sense for us technologically now. But in 100 years, when we have a different technology, it's they potentially will try and explain it just like religion always has, specific to the technology they have. But I think the workaround is, and why when you said that and Neil said it, I get that idea. Are we the first? Are we the last? No. But that's assuming that there was no causative force originally. That was assuming that it happened by chance, and all of this is a product of chance. And yes, of course, mathematically, there's no chance we are base reality or the last one.
If there are multiple realities.
If there are.
Yeah. So I know I'm the guest here, but I have a question for you.
Oh, please.
Okay, so everything you said so far, like in the last 5 minutes, there's nothing crazy about it. You keep saying you sound crazy, but like, you don't. Trust me, man. Like,
thank you for saying that when I said we're in a video game, it doesn't sound crazy. That was really persuasive.
No, because
of me.
that is not something that I can falsify. Therefore, it is something that should be investigated. So when you say that, you're 51-49, but you still you believe for the most part that you live in a simulation, right? So why? Why do you believe that?
Oh, why do I believe it?
Yeah.
Well, I'd love to give you some line about logic and rationale, but I'm sure it's an extension of my subconscious reality, my fanatic mom, the worldview that I was painted pre my subconscious forming. I'm assuming that's a part of it. So then I extrapolated information to support my worldview. And even when I forfeited the idea of God after the trauma in my life, I still had enough residual pieces of that ghost in me to gravitate back to it. So I would guess that I would explain it that way, because all I can do from my perspective is say it seems illogical to me for this to come from nothing with no design, but I can't obviously 100% identify the genesis of why that is, but it's definitely, I'll admit that it's biased for sure.
Okay. So like when you make a statement, whether it be I believe in God, or I believe we live in a simulation, I believe evolution is a thing that happened, the response should always be, if someone's thinking critically, the response should be, why? Because if you're making that claim, why do you believe that? So if you say I believe we live in a simulation, I'm not going to immediately respond with, okay, how do I prove this guy wrong? Because that's fucking stupid. Like that's absolutely not the way I would look at it. My first thought was, okay, well, why? Because I would want to know what the things are that you observed or interacted with, or what piece of information you had that I don't, that led you down that road. Just like I believe that the theory of evolution is most likely accurate because of the research and experiments that have been run. So if you say that we believe that we live in a simulation, I'm not going to say wrong. I'm going to say, I had never really thought about that as much. So I would like to know, I would like to see what the things are that lead you in that direction. Because if there isn't something that, whether it be mathematically or scientifically, that pulls, the data in that direction, I'm not going to say you're wrong. I'm going to say there's not enough to make me agree with you.
Okay, that was great. And I agree. And so now I'm going to convince you. I'm just going to talk about my belief. Now we're going to talk about the quasi hard science. So scientifically, what supports this idea to me? Number one is obviously the double slit experiment and the delayed double slit experiment. Where are you at with the validity of that experiment and what is it can be interpreted to mean?
I mean, what does it mean that subatomic particles can function as both, waves and as, why am I blanking right now?
Balls of energy, photons. So wave and
particles and waves. Sorry, that's it.
Particles, right? Yeah.
Because quantum mechanics says that a photon, light can function as both a particle, a photon, and a wave, a light wave, right? That is crazy. The split experiment, the two slit experiment, showed part of that. And that doesn't make any sense. It also doesn't make any sense that, an electron can be in two places at once, or that, there are literally subatomic particles that blink in and out of existence for no reason all the time everywhere. Like, no clue. So when there's shit like that we don't understand, I look at that and I say, there's a big hole there. I really hope we find it. Let's go find it. And we've filled in holes over time, the discovery of, different strong and weak forces between, particles, or the discovery of the Higgs boson, and how that was really underwhelming, but I'm not going to get into that. Because it had the chance. I
expected more too.
It had the chance to answer the biggest question, and it ended up being right in the middle, but whatever. So
wait, time out. So you're saying that we thought we broke the simulation, we thought we broke and cracked the code and revealed what was going on, and it was obfuscated by us. I just don't think that's intentional. I think that's very much intentional. I think that the creator, the programmer, the super intelligence, the whatever the origination of this reality has gone to extreme lengths to remain at least quasi anonymous. And I think that every time that we think we're going to figure it out, there's another level, and I just see him going, anyways, whatever.
So just because it could drive me crazy, and I touched on it, whenever the Large Hadron Collider was, was starting its first run of experiments in 2010, 11, and 12, the basic version of this is that, if the Higgs was confirmed and was, measured to be functioning at 115 giga electron volts, 115, then that would basically say that our understanding of the physical world is extremely close to accurate. The standard model is correct, and we're on the right track to understanding reality. If it was measured at 140 giga electron volts, 140, that would mean that literally everything we understand about quantum mechanics and about physical reality was so wrong that every book would have to be rewritten. And the 5,000 scientists that work on this experiment, they were waiting to see the result, and they were totally
comfortable. 132, right in the center.
And they were totally comfortable with the fact that they might find out their entire field was super fucked up. And in the first year, their initial data sets, before they had a large enough data set to really, get an average from, was showing 140. And there was panic because it was like, well, the map says we're wrong, so we might be wrong, guys. So when everything finally wrapped up and they had a large enough data set, the number came out on one side of the collider, because there's 6 experiments that run at the same time. On one side, the number was, it came out to 125.3. Another one, it was 125.6.
That's hilarious.
And so they were like, hey, Dr. Higgs, we found your boson. It didn't answer the ultimate secret of the universe, though.
Totally.
And that was just so sad. Like, it was the middle. Like, come on, man.
I've never heard that, and I love that. And thank you for sharing that with me, because I had no access to that information. But full-on confirmation bias for me is that, in one of my documentaries, I say, is the programmer like, is this a parlor trick? Is he like sinister or nefarious? Like, why all this ambiguity? And to me, that just is that idea that like literally, if they solved it and they said, we know there is a God, there isn't a God, this is a simulation, we know, then the rules would be up. Like, there's 6 billion people in this fucking thing, and it would be like, oh, it's this, game over, you're in the Truman Show. And that's not going to happen. Like that, I don't think that's going to happen. So, all right, so quantum physics, and then let me ask you this: we've been doing this for a couple hours, and I think we do this probably for a lot longer if we want to do. But do you want to? do we think about wrapping up and then doing like another episode down the road, or should we like? What do you want to do? I know it's technically my show, but
I'm trying to remember how I got sidetracked on the Higgs stuff.
You were talking about the double slit experiment and light existing in 2 places in non-locality and stuff.
Yeah, because you asked me like, what do I think about that? And the response is, there are things that happen that we don't understand, and that sucks, but I hope that we learn more. So, I'm assuming that was your segue into like, well, a simulation would explain this.
Yeah, it was. And I was going to go gaps, which you like preemptively said I couldn't do that. So
checkmate,
point
bitch.
to you. Yeah, seriously. Like, well, I'm out of here. Thanks for winning this. So I would say that, yes, they can exist in 2 ways, and that doesn't make any sense. And I would say that the quantum field, by everybody's admonition, I just watched a 2-hour lecture on the quantum field theory. These guys that think they know, they just don't know. It's like this huge mystery. This one quantum field scientist, he actually, I got to pull the video up, and this is what upsets me about science, obviously, but he goes, right now, we think that all of reality is, we teach that all of reality is this one thing, and we teach it in school because the kids going to school wouldn't be able to handle what the truth is. So we teach them one thing. It's a white lie. I got him on, he's saying this in this YouTube. Then he goes, and then we find out that it's actually this whole other thing. And what he's saying, it's the quantum field, is that we're all part of this same field that we can't understand. It's like a magnetic field, and things take a shape based on basically the consciousness of human, it sounds like. So what I would say is, with this idea of energy being a potentiality and an actual particle, what you have is the observer, if I understand the science correctly, determining its form. And if the observer, whether he watches it or not, has an effect on reality, what I've said for a long time is, it's as though the very particles that make up this reality are like listening, waiting for the human involvement. And so that gets very etherical, new agey. But where it would make sense in the simulation model is, if you know video game design, which I'm sure you know a little bit, you can't build a huge immersive world, let's just say the size of the Earth, and have the computer make the entire thing all at once. There's not enough RAM, not enough memory to be able to do this. So what they do is they build the potentiality of the Earth, and then they render the reality just outside of the vision of the viewer. So, I'm in Maine, right? And I go to wherever you're at. It doesn't have to exist from here to there, but everywhere I'm going, as far out as I can see, it needs to manifest. And that's how video games work. That's exactly how it works. In Grand Theft Auto, the backside of the world doesn't exist until you get there and it renders. So this would make sense from the simulation hypothesis idea, because what you have is the matter determining its actual form as the user interacts with it. And I think science backs that up enough where it's at least viable, right? 5149. But I think we should do a whole episode on the simulation hypothesis a little bit more, because I think it's got, the ramifications are huge, and I would like, I guess I'll end on this. I got to wrap it up. So I would say that I would like science to basically be somewhere around where you're at, where I'm at. So I think that the you and I disparity is a lot narrower than the Dawkins Ken Ham disparity.
Yes, definitely.
And I think that that's irreconcilable. And I think that Ham is never going to get the idea because he's too stuck in his bias. And I think that Dawkins is never going to get his idea because he's too stuck in his bias. But I think if we can kind of track or fine tune to this area where we go, you know, let's let the science speak for itself. Let's think creatively. Let's come up with solutions. Let's not be dogmatic. Let's not say there has to be a designer. Let's not say there has to not be a designer. Let's let the science speak for itself and let's try and solve some things. I think there's an exciting front coming, and I think it is coming. And I think of all people, Elon Musk is going to be the one talking about somebody from a different industry affecting, you know, science. The guy's figured out a way to get off the fucking planet, like fly cars up there and shit. This guy has access to information that I don't. And he's obviously a bright guy. And he's Elon Musk. He says we're in a simulation. I understand he likes to say controversial things, but he could also have been ruined by saying that. The dude says we're in a simulation. And I think there's a whole generation of video game playing Elon Musk fanboys and girls that are going to see that and go, let's go figure that shit out. And I hope they do. And I hope that their thought process isn't what Neil deGrasse Tyson said here, which is trying to find a solution without a causative force, because I just don't think the formula adds up. So that's it. That's the end of my argument for today.
I think then I have three final thoughts to
Okay, so we got another 20 minutes here, which is exciting. Let's do it.
Because you said a whole bunch of shit, and I was like,
I'm sorry. You just gotta cut me off, dude. Yeah.
Shut the fuck up. No.
Yeah, seriously.
So when we're the idea that reality is procedurally generated, like No Man's Sky, right? That, you know, when you interact with something, that, like, for example, my car is outside, but no human is interacting with it right now, so it's not there until my consciousness perceives it, right? So that is something that I have, you know, I've read about, I've seen that theory. My big issue with it though is if you require a consciousness interacting with something for it to materialize, why did the free floating protons and neutrons in the first 300,000 years of the universe manage to coalesce and interact with each other if there was no human there to look at them and go, come together, little guys?
I'll answer that. And this is why this is going to keep going forever, which I love. It's potentially because what you believe or what I believe about the reality is just built into the simulation to make it believable, to make it look like we didn't come out of nowhere. So either my version or your version can be or cannot be accurate, but it had to have some version of its history, right? It had to have like an originate, like, this is how I came from, this is where we came from, whatever. Does that make sense? Did I lose you, or I don't know?
just like basically we'll never fucking know, because
Higgs boson, dude. As
of right now, you can't disprove the simulation theory. So it's out there. But, you know, the only other thought that I had was there was some point where I made this note while we were talking. I don't remember what it was about, but something about consciousness and shit reminded me of a quote. Don't remember where it came from, but basically the idea that human consciousness is the universe waking up and discovering itself. And I think that is a very new agey way to say it, but it makes a lot of sense, because if we're right and it's Big Bang, stars, you know, generate heavy metals, generate planets, generate life, people, then technically, like, you observing the universe is the universe itself waking up. And I think that's a really fun way to look at it.
Wow.
For sure.
I didn't like where you were going with that, but I like where you went with that. Because, you know, Carl Sagan you probably are familiar with his quote of saying, screw Jesus, the stars died for you, right? You know, that's what he said.
It's kind of funny.
It is kind of funny. Yeah, obviously. I mean, I thought of all people you would you'd like that humor. So, but that I thought that's kind of where you were going. But then this idea of, if the universe did come into existence by accident, if it did through its processes create consciousness, and then technically we as the universe have become sentient. So that's interesting. I mean, I think that you have to. Was it Plato and Democritus? Is that the idealism versus materialism discussion? I think people don't realize that you have to concede one of two truths. Either this physical reality created consciousness, like what you just said, or a consciousness created this physical reality. And I think that, you know, everybody does make that decision, but that's what you're saying. You're saying this universe created consciousness, which it's possible. Obviously, we don't know, but I like that idea that if it did create this reality and we became sentient, that in one level the universe is sentient, and that could almost rectify the two things. So, all right, good. Do you have the third thing?
Yeah, the one quote that I've been saying for years, and I'm going to use it to sum up everything I've said so far, and it's how I think everybody should look at the universe and studies as a whole. If there are only two possibilities, one being that we are here by accident, and one being that we are here because somebody put us here, either one of those is a fucking miracle.
Yeah.
So I'm totally at peace with the fact I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to figure out which of those two miracles is the most statistically probable. Right now, it leans one direction, but if somebody can convince me to lean the other way, they're both crazy, whether it be a simulation or a god or it's just an accident. Those are both really fucking crazy. So I would like to know which one is less crazy, and that's my whole vibe.
Dude, that's so good. That's so good. The whole thing, that whole little diatribe is so good because it is a miracle. And, I have a son now, and I fell in love with my wife, and this amazing human was a product of it. And it's so perfectly, I have these chickens. It's hard to go from my son to chickens. Hopefully he's not listening, but they eat bugs, which in Maine is a big deal. And they fire out fucking eggs. Like that's every time, like I watch them eat what we call mayflies out here, which are terrible, and they bite you, and they eat these things. And then they make an egg somehow, and it is a miracle. So the thing is a miracle. I love the idea of you saying, whichever one is the least crazy, and I would just influence you, as I hope you influence me with your ideas, to not dismiss the idea of an intelligent designer because of a bad religious experience. That happens all the time. And I think to be a true scientist, an intellectually honest scientist, you have to disassociate the man-made structure of religion from the idea of a hyper intellect, a hyper supernatural force. Now, because man is opportunistic, we talked about this in the pre-discussion, man makes this thing. Man, the psychopaths of man, which is 1 out of 1,000, 100, doesn't matter. They're always going to want to control. They're going to want to control the world, religion. They're going to want to, I found this observation. They want to control their Boy Scout or Girl Scout clique, whatever that's called. It's crazy. Like the lady who, I call her a showrunner, the lady who becomes the head of the Girl Scout troop is a psychopath. Now, she doesn't act on it. I don't think she eats the children, but she bosses them around and totally gets off on people watching what she's doing and doing what she says. It's crazy. Like, that's not me. I would never want to, I don't want to boss little girls around, little guys around, right? I'm not a psychopath, I hope. But the psychopath will be the head of the Boy Scout class, and then it'll be the council person in your neighborhood, and then the fucking mayor. And I can't talk about this, but I know them, and they're all psychopaths, and they're power hungry, and they're willing to prey on the other humans for their own good, right? Like, there's no such thing as the creation of energy, it only transfers forms. These vampires, literal, metaphorical, whatever, will prey on someone. They will take the energy of the person. They will take your food. They will take your money. They will take your children. They will do these things. I know that's really basic. I'm sorry, I got dark there quick, but there's these people that do this thing, and it happens in religion as well, and especially with the Catholic Church. The psychopaths became the head, and now it's all been revealed. They were taking what wasn't theirs at the cost of the person that they were taking, right? So it's terrible. And it's really hard to disassociate those two things. But when Jesus Christ, who was a real historical figure, like him, love him, hate him, when he was on the earth, he hated the religious right. He wasn't mad at the sinner on the earth. He didn't go, what the fuck is, well, I shouldn't say, he didn't say, what's wrong with you people? Well, you just keep sinning. I just don't get it. He talked to the Pharisees who wanted to kill him, by the way. And if you believe the story that he was God incarnate, how ironic that God shows up and these psychopaths want to kill him, right? So he's on the earth and they want to kill him. And he goes, you're doing a very bad job. He's not happy with them, and they kill the guy. So that's bad. Like, they blew it. Like, if God walked on the earth and they killed him, religion, I would say, got it wrong there, right? And I think they get it wrong. And when Jesus was here, he wasn't mad at the people. He was mad at the people who were supposed to be representing him, who were leading people away from him, and also trying to kill him, right? That's who Jesus. So, like, I'm mad at the religious authority as well, because I've talked to hundreds and hundreds of people in my life, and the vast majority of them that are mad at God are mad at religion. Now, there's also people that's like, my wife miscarried and died, and it was fucking terrible, and it was nobody's fault, but I hate God. And I get that. Like, that's a shitty draw. That's a shitty draw. But anyways, I just would encourage you to disassociate the tragedy that is religion from the potentiality that is the designing intellect. And I think that's where things like this, like, obviously if we're in a simulation, something made that shit. Like, that would be really hard to just imagine that it happened by chance, organically, ones and zeros, whatever. But that's kind of where I'm at. But I'd like to have you on again. You know, you said earlier it's my show, whatever. It's not my show. It's my show as much as I coordinate it. People want to hear from you. I want to hear from you. So if you want to write a whole list of things you want to talk about, if you want to have another discussion, let's do it. And what I'm going to do is make a teaser for my followers. And do you want me to make one for you, or do you want me to send you some files? How do you want me to do that?
Actually, just like send me like whatever your teaser is, and I'll like it might be something that I could use as well. Like, sweet, depends.
If you want to, obviously you don't have to, and I'll send you a final version before I send it out. So you're an awesome guy, man. I appreciate the time. It's been a great conversation. Yeah, I really appreciate it. I mean, you're obviously like, I'm right in about everything, and you're wrong about everything, but you seem totally. Just to make sure just to be clear. Totally, and obviously, and all we hate each other also because you know, because of who's right and wrong, and that's just, and this is irreconcilable. So that's where we're at. Nah, this is fantastic, dude. We're doing this again for sure. Yeah, I appreciate it, man. Thanks for coming on, and we'll talk soon. Hell yeah, you have a good one. You too. Take care.